The wind howled across the frozen plains of Frostfall. Snow piled high against the lone wooden cabin that stood defiant against the endless white. Smoke rose from the stone chimney, the only sign of life for 100 miles. Inside, Tai-Ho sat by the fire, his weathered hands carefully cleaning the day's hunt. He was tall for a human, with broad shoulders now slightly stooped from years of carrying burdens both seen and unseen. His face, lined with scars and wrinkles, told the story of a hard life. His dark eyes, however, remained sharp and alert. The cabin walls were simple. Wooden planks sealed with pine tar kept out the worst of the cold. Animal skins hung as rugs and blankets. A shelf held a few books, real paper books, not digital tablets. In one corner sat a communications unit, old but functional, turned off most days. Above the stone fireplace hung Tai-Ho's most prized possession, a long rifle that looked ancient and worn. Its metal parts showed spots of rust, and the wooden stock was scratched and dented. To most eyes, it looked like junk, a relic that should have been thrown away years ago. Tai-Ho called it Whisper. Another day survived. Tai-Ho muttered to himself, a habit formed after 8 years alone on this frozen rock. He placed the cleaned meat into his smoking rack and washed his hands in a basin of melted snow. Outside, the first moon of Frostfall rose, casting blue light through the single window. Tai-Ho poured himself a small cup of homemade berry wine and raised it to the rifle. "To old friends," he said, "the only ones who never lie." The cabin creaked in response, buffeted by another gust of wind. 15 years had passed since the Earth-Nexus War ended. 15 years since the Vesperan Confederation had declared victory over the primitive humans who dared to resist their expansion. The history books, written by the winners, of course, spoke of Earth's foolish resistance and inevitable defeat. What those books didn't mention was how long that inevitable defeat took. 8 years of war. 8 years where humans, outgunned and outmatched in every way, still managed to make the technologically superior Vesperans pay for every inch of ground. Tai-Ho had been there for the worst of it. The Winter Campaign, the Battle of New Sydney, the 7 Days of Silence, names that made Vesperan commanders still wake up in cold sweats. Now he was just a hunter. A nobody. A human exile on a border planet so cold and remote that even the Vesperans rarely bothered to visit, just how he wanted it. The communications unit in the corner suddenly blinked to life, startling Tai-Ho from his thoughts. It had been 3 months since the last merchant ship had passed close enough for a signal. He walked over and pressed the receive button. "Attention ground resident," came a clipped voice, the translator barely hiding the distinctive harmonic tones of Vesperan speech. "This is the diplomatic vessel Bright Ascension, requesting emergency landing clearance. Our navigation systems have been damaged by solar activity. We have detected your dwelling and will be setting down 2 kilometers north of your position in approximately 15 minutes. Tai-Ho frowned. Vesperan diplomats. Here, the message continued. Local records indicate you are a human trader named Tai-Ho. We expect appropriate hospitality as representatives of the Galactic Confederation. Prepare suitable accommodations. Message ends. Tai-Ho looked at the communicator for a long moment, then at the rifle above his fireplace. No request, just orders. Typical. "Well, Whisper," he said to the old gun. "Looks like we have guests coming." He took another sip of his wine. "Let's hope they don't stay long." He pulled on his heavy coat and boots, then grabbed his outdoor lamp. Through the window, he could already see the bright lights of a ship descending through the storm clouds. Sleek and shining, like all Vesperan vessels, it looked as out of place in this wild landscape as a diamond in a mud puddle. Tai-Ho sighed and opened his door, stepping out into the swirling snow. His quiet life was about to be disturbed, and he had a bad feeling about it. The Vesperan ship landed with a soft hiss on the snow. It was sleek and silver, shaped like a teardrop with glowing blue lines running along its hull. Steam rose where its hot engines touched the frozen ground. Tai-Ho watched from 50 meters away, his lamp held high against the dark. The snow was falling harder now, big flakes catching in his gray-streaked hair. He pulled his scarf tighter around his face and waited. A door slid open on the side of the ship. Bright lights spilled out onto the snow. 3 figures stepped out first, Vesperan guards in glossy black armor. They were tall and thin, with smooth skin that shimmered with a faint blue glow. Their helmets had no visors, just a series of small sensors where eyes should be. Behind them came 2 more Vesperans. One wore elaborate robes in deep purple with gold trim. He stood tall and proud, his long fingers adorned with metal rings. This was clearly someone important. The second wore simpler clothes in light blue and carried several electronic devices. Human, called the one in purple robes. Approach and identify yourself. Tai-Ho walked forward slowly. The guards kept their hands on their weapons, sleek energy pistols that could burn a hole through steel. I'm Tai-Ho, he said simply. Welcome to Frostfall. The robed Vesperan looked around with obvious disgust. This place is worse than reported. I am Ambassador Du-One of the 7th Diplomatic Circle. This is my aide, Jai-Yun. He nodded toward the Vesperan in blue. Jai-Yun gave a small bow. Thank you for receiving us, Earth-Human Tai-Ho. Du-One continued, not waiting for Tai-Ho to respond. Our navigation systems were damaged by a solar flare. Repairs will take approximately 12 Earth hours. We require shelter until then. It wasn't a request. Tai-Ho nodded once and turned. Follow me. Storm's getting worse. As they trudged through the deepening snow, one of the guards slipped and fell. The others laughed. A strange, musical sound. Du-One made a sharp comment in their native language, and they fell silent. Jai-Yun moved closer to Tai-Ho. You have lived here long? She asked, her translator making her voice sound flat. 8 years, he replied. Alone. Tai-Ho nodded. Interesting choice for a human. Your kind usually prefer groups. Tai-Ho said nothing. They reached the cabin door, and he pushed it open. The warm air from inside was a welcome relief from the biting cold. Du-One entered and immediately wrinkled his nose. It smells of animal here. That would be dinner, Tai-Ho said, pointing to the meat hanging over the smoking rack. The guards spread out, examining the cabin. One reached for Whisper above the fireplace. Don't touch that, Tai-Ho said sharply. The guard pulled back his hand but laughed. The human values his trash. Du-One walked to the fireplace and looked up at the rifle. Is this Earth technology? It looks ancient. It's just an old gun, Tai-Ho said. Du-One smirked. During the war, human weapons barely scratched our shields. Is this what you fought with? No wonder you lost so quickly. Jai-Yun made a small noise, drawing Du-One's attention. Ambassador, perhaps we should discuss repair schedules. The ambassador nodded and turned away from the rifle. Human, prepare food for us. We will need separate sleeping arrangements from you. Your animal smells are unpleasant. Tai-Ho's face remained calm, but his hand clenched slightly at his side. There's only one room. You can have the bed. I'll sleep by the fire. Du-One waved a hand dismissively. Acceptable, though primitive. As Tai-Ho moved to prepare food, Jai-Yun approached him quietly. I apologize for the ambassador's manner. He is unused to border planets. Tai-Ho glanced at her. Unlike the others, she seemed genuinely curious about him. No need to apologize. I'm used to how Vesperans see humans. Jai-Yun tilted her head. You speak well for a border trader. I wasn't always a trader. One of the guards called Jai-Yun over. As she walked away, she looked back at Tai-Ho with new interest in her large, silvery eyes. Outside, the storm howled louder, trapping them all together for the night. Tai-Ho stirred the stew he was making and glanced up at Whisper on the wall. The rifle seemed to gleam slightly in the firelight, as if it too was watching the unwelcome guests. The night was going to be long, and Taeho had a feeling it would get worse before it got better. Dinner was a quiet affair. The Vesperans picked at the stew Taeho had made, clearly displeased with the simple meal. Do-won barely touched his bowl, instead sipping from a flask he carried. The guards ate reluctantly, while Jae-yun was the only one who finished her portion. "This is what passes for cuisine on this frozen rock?" Do-won asked, pushing his bowl away. "Even for human standards, it's primitive." Taeho said nothing as he collected the bowls. One of the guards stretched his long legs toward the fire, accidentally kicking over Taeho's small shelf of books. "Watch it," Taeho said, his voice low but firm. The guard smirked. The human values his paper waste. He picked up one of the fallen books and flipped through it carelessly. Words on paper. So inefficient. Taeho took the book from the guard's hands. "It was my father's." Do-won laughed. Sentiment. Another human weakness. Jae-yun stepped in. "Ambassador, I've reviewed the repair logs. The navigation systems should be functional by morning, but the storm may delay our departure." Do-won frowned. "We cannot be late for the summit on Nexus Prime. The trade agreements must be signed on schedule." "Nexus Prime?" Taeho asked, looking up from where he was replacing his books. "Not that it concerns you, human," Do-won said. "But yes, the former human colony is now a major trade hub, quite improved under Confederation management." Taeho's jaw tightened slightly. "I know what Nexus Prime is." Do-won raised an eyebrow. "Oh, has our little hermit traveled before?" Before Taeho could answer, one of the guards walked to the fireplace and pointed at Whisper. "What is this ancient weapon for, human?" "Hunting." "Sometimes," Taeho replied. The guard laughed. "It looks like it would fall apart if fired." "May I?" Without waiting for permission, Do-won stood and lifted the rifle from its hooks on the wall. He held it awkwardly, clearly unfamiliar with such weapons. "Remarkable. It's heavier than it looks." Taeho watched silently, his body tense. "During the war," Do-won continued, turning the rifle in his hands, "our soldiers reported that human weapons were painfully basic, simple chemical propellants and metal projectiles." He peered down the barrel. "Is this what your kind fought with? No wonder the war ended so quickly." "The war lasted 8 years," Taeho said quietly. 8 years of inevitable defeat," Do-won corrected. He ran a finger along a groove in the wooden stock. "What's this?" "Damage." "A mark," Taeho said. "For remembering." "Remembering what?" "Each mark has a story." Taeho stood and carefully took the rifle back from Do-won. "And none of them are for sharing." Do-won's face darkened. "You forget your place, human. I am an ambassador of the Confederation, and this is my home," Taeho replied evenly. He placed Whisper back on its hooks. "Your guests here. Remember that." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The guards tensed, hands moving to their weapons. Jae-yun stepped between them, and Do-won. "Perhaps we should all rest," she suggested. "It's been a long day, and the ambassador has important meetings ahead." Do-won stared at Taeho for a long moment, then nodded curtly. "Yes, prepare the sleeping area, human." Hours later, when the Vesperans were asleep, Taeho sat by the dying fire. He couldn't sleep with strangers in his home, especially these strangers. He stared into the embers, lost in memories he usually kept locked away. "You were there, weren't you?" Taeho looked up. Jae-yun stood in the shadows, watching him. "Where?" he asked. "The winter campaign. Nexus Prime. Before it was called that." She stepped closer. "I studied the war at the academy. The human resistance on Nexus lasted longer than any other colony." Taeho didn't answer. "There were stories," Jae-yun continued, "of a human sniper. The Vesperan troops called him the Winter Ghost. He held the northern pass for 7 days, alone." Taeho poked at the fire. "Just stories." Jae-yun's silver eyes studied him. "Perhaps, But I wonder why a simple trader has military stance and speaks with the voice of someone used to command. She glanced at the rifle on the wall. Or why he treasures an old weapon with precisely 15 marks carved into its stock. Tai-Ho looked up at her sharply. The exact number of Vesperan officers killed by the Winter Ghost, Jai-Yun said softly. Outside, the storm howled, but inside, the silence was deeper and more dangerous. Tai-Ho woke with a start. Something was wrong. Years of combat had given him a sense for danger, and right now that sense was screaming. The cabin was quiet. Too quiet. The storm had stopped. He rose silently from his spot by the dead fire. Early morning light filtered through the frosted windows. The Vesperans were still asleep. Du-Won on Tai-Ho's bed, Jai-Yun on a makeshift cot, and the guards sitting against the wall, their eyes dimmed in sleep mode. Tai-Ho moved to the window and peered out. The snow had stopped falling, leaving a pristine white blanket over everything. The Vesperan ship gleamed in the distance, but something caught his eye, a small dark spot on the perfect white. Then another, and another. Footprints, coming from the east, at least 6 people moving toward the cabin. No traders came this way. No one lived within 100 miles. Whoever was out there wasn't friendly. Tai-Ho grabbed his heavy coat and slipped outside. The cold bit at his face as he crept around the cabin, following the trail. He moved from tree to tree, staying hidden, his old training coming back without thought. He spotted them at the edge of the clearing. 6 figures in white camouflage, carrying heavy weapons. Their faces were covered with red masks. Through a pair of old binoculars, Tai-Ho could see the symbol painted on their shoulders. A red skull with a jagged crack running through it. Crimson Skull, one of the most feared raider groups in the outer systems. They attacked ships and outposts without mercy, taking what they wanted and killing everyone else. Tai-Ho slipped back to the cabin. Inside, the Vesperans were waking up. The storm has passed, Du-Won was saying. Prepare to leave immediately. Ambassador, Tai-Ho said quietly, we have a problem. Jai-Yun noticed his expression. What's wrong? Crimson Skull Raiders, 6 of them, coming this way. The guards jumped to their feet, drawing their weapons. Du-Won looked alarmed. Impossible. How would they know we're here? Your ship wasn't damaged by a solar flare, Tai-Ho said. It was hit by an ion pulse. A hunting tactic. They disabled you, then followed you down. Preposterous, Du-Won sputtered. How would you know this? Because that's what I would have done, Tai-Ho replied coldly. One of the guards moved to the window. He's right. 6 figures approaching, heavily armed. Du-Won turned pale. This is a diplomatic vessel. I am protected by Confederation law. Tai-Ho almost laughed. Raiders don't care about laws, Ambassador. Our weapons will handle this, the lead guard said confidently. He checked his energy pistol and frowned. The charge is low. The cold has affected the power cells. Typical, Tai-Ho muttered. Vesperan technology doesn't work well in extreme cold. And what would you suggest, human? Du-Won snapped. Before Tai-Ho could answer, a voice boomed from outside. ATTN to Lion in the cabin. We know you are in there. Ambassador Du-Won. Everyone froze. Jai-Yun looked at Du-Won with wide eyes. They know who you are. This is a targeted attack. The voice continued. Send out the ambassador and the arrest of you can live UAV minutes. They're lying, Tai-Ho said. They'll kill everyone. Du-Won straightened his robes, trying to look dignified despite his fear. I will speak to them. I am a diplomat. I can negotiate. They're not here to talk, Tai-Ho warned, but Du-Won was already striding to the door. The ambassador stepped outside, hands raised. I am Ambassador Du-Won of the 7th Diplomatic Circle. Whatever grievance you have can be addressed through proper channels. For a moment, there was silence. Then a single shot rang out. Du-1 stumbled back inside, clutching his shoulder where green blood seeped through his purple robes. "They shot me," he gasped in disbelief. "They actually shot a diplomatic representative." The guards pulled him away from the door as more shots hit the cabin walls. Wood splintered, and a window shattered. "What do we do?" Jai-Yun asked, helping Du-1 to a chair. The guards fired back through the windows, but their weakened weapons barely reached the tree line where the raiders had taken cover. "We're trapped," a guard said. "Our weapons are useless at this range." Tai-Ho looked at the raiders, then at the wounded ambassador, then up at the old rifle mounted above the fireplace. Whispers seemed to be waiting for him. "Not all weapons," Tai-Ho said quietly. He reached up and took down the rifle. The Vesperans stared as Tai-Ho took down the old rifle. Du-1, still clutching his wounded shoulder, let out a pained laugh. "That ancient piece of junk. What do you think you'll do with that against modern shields?" Tai-Ho didn't answer. He sat at the table, away from the windows, and laid the rifle down. His movements were calm and precise, like a ritual he had performed 1,000 times. Outside, the raiders fired another volley. The guards returned fire, but their weakened weapons barely reached the tree line. "Our ammunition is almost depleted," the lead guard reported. "Their shields are too strong for our current power levels." Jai-Yun moved next to Tai-Ho, watching as his fingers moved over the rifle. "What are you doing?" "Preparing," he said simply. To everyone's surprise, Tai-Ho pressed his thumb against a small patch on the wooden stock. A faint blue light scanned his print. Then, with a soft click, the outer shell of the rifle shifted. The seemingly rusted metal plates slid aside, revealing gleaming components beneath. The dented wooden stock unfolded, extending the length of the weapon. Hidden compartments opened, and Tai-Ho's fingers moved quickly, assembling pieces that had been concealed within the rifle's frame. "What is that?" one of the guards asked, eyes wide. "Whisper isn't just a gun," Tai-Ho explained as he worked. "She's a reminder that appearances can be deceiving." Within seconds, the transformation was complete. Where the old rusted rifle had been, now lay a sleek, high-tech weapon. Its barrel was longer, with strange markings etched along its length. The scope unfolded into a complex targeting system with multiple lenses. "Impossible," Du-1 whispered. "That's military technology." "Human military technology," Tai-Ho corrected. He reached into a hidden compartment in the floor beneath a loose board and pulled out a small box. Inside were specialized rounds, each with a faint blue glow. "Our scanners would have detected such a weapon," a guard protested. Tai-Ho smiled thinly. "No, they wouldn't. That was the whole point." He loaded the rounds carefully. "When you're outgunned, you learn to be sneaky." "Those look like phase shift rounds," Jai-Yun said, leaning closer. "Those were banned after the war." "Yes, they were," Tai-Ho agreed. He finished loading and looked up at her. "Because they work." Another shot hit the cabin, splintering wood near the window. The lead guard ducked down. "We have maybe 10 minutes before they rush us," he reported. Tai-Ho nodded. "I need information." "How many?" "Exact positions. What weapons?" The guards looked at each other, then at Du-1. The ambassador was pale from blood loss, but his eyes were now fixed on Tai-Ho with new understanding. "Tell him," Du-1 ordered. The lead guard moved to Tai-Ho's side. 6 raiders, 2 at the large boulder to the northeast, 1 in the tall pine tree at the edge of the clearing, 2 behind the fallen log directly east, 1 moving between positions, likely the leader. Tai-Ho absorbed this information silently. He checked the rifle's scope, making tiny adjustments. "Their shields?" he asked. "Standard Krell technology. They block energy weapons and high-velocity projectiles." Tai-Ho nodded. "Phase shift rounds will bypass that. They move slower than normal bullets until they pass through the shield, then accelerate." "Human ingenuity," Jai-Yun said softly. Born of desperation, Taeho replied. I need a spotter, someone with good eyes. Jia-yun stepped forward. I was trained in observation at the academy. Do-won tried to object, but Jia-yun ignored him. She moved to the window, staying low. Give me bearings once I start, Taeho told her. Wind direction. Any movement. Taeho stood and moved to a small chair positioned away from the windows. He settled into it and rested the rifle on the table, pointing toward the largest window. The transformation wasn't just in the weapon. Taeho's entire demeanor had changed. Gone was the quiet hermit. His back straightened, his eyes sharpened, and his hands steadied. In his place sat a soldier, focused, deadly, and completely in control. What exactly are you planning to do? Do-won asked. Taeho's answer was simple. I'm going to eliminate the threat. He took a deep breath, and his finger curled around the trigger. Northeast, large pine tree, third branch from the bottom. Jia-yun said quietly. The spotter has a long-range rifle. Taeho nodded and shifted his aim slightly. The cabin was silent except for Do-won's labored breathing. Even the guards stood motionless, watching Taeho with a mixture of doubt and hope. Wind? Taeho asked. Light, from the west, about 5 kilometers per hour. Taeho made a tiny adjustment to his scope. First shot will be loud. They'll know our position. We're already surrounded, the lead guard pointed out. Taeho ignored him. He took a deep breath, then let half of it out. His finger tightened on the trigger. The rifle made a sound like tearing silk, much quieter than the guards expected. A blue flash burned from the barrel, and outside, a distant figure tumbled from the pine tree. Target down, Jia-yun confirmed, her voice showing surprise at the rifle's effectiveness. The raiders immediately opened fire on the cabin. Bullets and energy blasts tore into the walls. The guards ducked down. Boulder to the right, Taeho said calmly, already adjusting his aim. The leader will move there for better cover. How do you know? A guard asked. It's what I would do. Taeho sighted down the rifle. 3, 2, 1. On 1, a figure darted from behind a fallen log toward the boulder. Taeho fired again. The blue flash lit up the room, and the running raider dropped mid-stride. 2 down, Jia-yun reported. The others are pulling back. No, Taeho corrected. They're repositioning. He worked the rifle's action, loading another round. They'll try to flank us. Do-won stared at Taeho in disbelief. The human hermit was gone. In his place was a calculating predator who seemed to know exactly what the enemy would do before they did it. The fallen log, left side, Jia-yun said. Taeho shifted and fired in one smooth motion. Another raider fell. You're not aiming where they are, the lead guard observed. You're aiming where they will be. Taeho nodded once. Anticipation beats reaction. He sighted down the scope again. Hold your fire until I'm done. Your weapons will just give away your positions. For the next few minutes, Taeho worked with mechanical precision. Each shot found its target. Each movement was economical and practiced. The raiders tried to advance, to retreat, to flank, but Taeho seemed to read their minds. Last one, Jia-yun said finally, behind the ship. He's trying to use it as cover. Taeho frowned. If he damages your engines, we're all stuck here. That shot is impossible, the lead guard said. The angle is wrong, and the distance is too great. Taeho stood up and moved to a different window. No shot is impossible, just improbable. He settled the rifle on the windowsill. Jia-yun, I need exact wind speed. 7 kilometers per hour, gusting to 10. Taeho made several adjustments to his scope. He paused, watching something through the lens. Then he fired, not at the ship, but at a tall rock formation beside it. The blue flash lit up the window. The phase shift round hit the rock and ricocheted, curving around the ship's hull. A moment later, the last raider fell. The cabin was silent. The guards stared at Taeho. Do-One's mouth hung open. "That's not possible," the lead guard whispered. "It's called a bank shot," Tai-Ho said, lowering the rifle. "Old human sniper trick." Jai-Yun was looking at him with new eyes. "You're him, aren't you? The Winter Ghost?" Tai-Ho didn't answer. He began checking the cabin's windows and walls for damage. During the war, Jai-Yun continued, there were stories of a human sniper who could make impossible shots, who knew what the enemy would do before they did it. She looked at the rifle in his hands, who carried a weapon that our scanners couldn't detect. Do-One sat up straighter, his pain momentarily forgotten. The Winter Ghost was a myth, propaganda to boost human morale. "No," the lead guard said slowly. "I served in the final campaigns. The Winter Ghost was real. I lost 3 commanding officers to him." He looked at Tai-Ho with new respect. "You fought well, for a human." Tai-Ho checked his rifle, then looked out at the bodies in the snow. "The fight isn't over yet. Those were just scouts." "Scouts?" Do-One asked, his voice rising. "What do you mean?" "Crimson Skull never sends just 6 raiders," Tai-Ho explained grimly. "The main force won't be far behind." "We need to move," Tai-Ho said, already gathering supplies. "The main raider force will be here within 2 hours." Do-One tried to stand but winced in pain. His shoulder wound was still bleeding, staining his purple robes a darker shade. "I cannot travel in this condition," he protested. Tai-Ho went to a cabinet and pulled out a small medkit. He tossed it to Jai-Yun. "Basic human medicine. Not as good as your tech, but it will help with the pain." As Jai-Yun tended to Do-One's wound, the lead guard approached Tai-Ho. "I am Han-Jae, Chief of Security for the Ambassador. My scanner shows a larger ship approaching from the southwest." Tai-Ho nodded. "We have less time than I thought." He looked out the window at the Vespiran diplomatic vessel. "Is your ship ready to fly?" "No," Han-Jae admitted. "The navigation system is still down. We can hover, but we can't break atmosphere or plot a course." Tai-Ho frowned. "Then we need a defensible position." He turned to Han-Jae. "Your men, were they soldiers before they were guards?" "Of course. All diplomatic security comes from military ranks." "Good. They'll need to remember their training." As Tai-Ho continued preparing, Jai-Yun spoke quietly to Do-One and the other guards. "Do you know the stories of the Winter Ghost?" she asked. The youngest guard nodded. "My father told me. A human sniper who held an entire Vespiran battalion at bay for 7 days during the battle for Nexus Prime." 7 days, Jai-Yun repeated. "In conditions exactly like these." She looked at Tai-Ho. "Cold enough to disable Vespiran technology. Terrain that favored someone who knew how to use it." Do-One followed her gaze. "You can't seriously believe this. Hermit is the Winter Ghost." That was 15 years ago. 15 marks on his rifle. Jai-Yun reminded him. Han-Jae had been listening. "The records say the Winter Ghost killed exactly 15 high-ranking officers before he disappeared." "He didn't disappear," said the young guard. "The official report says he was killed when our forces bombed the northern ridge." "Reports can be wrong," Jai-Yun said. Do-One shook his head. "This is absurd. The Winter Ghost was a monster, a murderer who killed from the shadows." "He was a soldier," Han-Jae corrected quietly, "fighting for his world, just as we fought for ours." Tai-Ho returned with an armful of equipment. Extra ammunition, a small device that looked like a remote, and a backpack. "We need to move to higher ground," he said, not acknowledging their conversation. "The ridge to the east has caves. We can hold them off from there." "Hold off a raider ship?" Do-One asked incredulously. "With one rifle?" Tai-Ho smiled thinly. "I've held off worse with less." As they prepared to leave, the young guard approached Tai-Ho cautiously. "Sir, is it true? Are you really the Winter Ghost?" Tai-Ho paused in his preparations. For a moment, he seemed to be looking at something far away. "The Winter Ghost died a long time ago," he said finally. I'm just a man trying to survive. But the rifle, the guard persisted. The skills, the 15 marks. Tai-Ho sighed. War creates legends. People need symbols. He checked his weapon again. I was just a soldier with a job to do. Han Jie stepped forward. I was there, he said quietly, at Nexus Prime, 3rd Battalion, Stellar Division. He straightened his back in a formal military posture. You killed my commanding officer, Colonel Sejong. 8th day of the siege, as he led the assault on the human settlement. The room went silent. Tai-Ho met Han Jie's eyes steadily. A clean shot, Han Jie continued. 2,000 meters through a snowstorm. We thought it was impossible. No shot is impossible, Tai-Ho said softly. Just improbable. Han Jie nodded, the phrase confirming what he already knew. My people called you a monster. A demon in the snow. He paused. But you could have killed hundreds more. You only targeted officers. Killing the right person saves more lives than killing many, Tai-Ho said. I never wanted to be a killer, just to protect my people. Jia Yun looked at him with new understanding. And now you're protecting us. Your former enemies. War is over, Tai-Ho said simply. He turned to the window and pointed to the ridge. Up there, I held off your people for 7 days. Now we'll use the same position to hold off the raiders. Do-Won stared at him in disbelief. Why would you help us? After everything. Tai-Ho checked his rifle one last time. Because right now, you're not Vesperans, and I'm not human. We're just people trying to survive. He headed for the door. And survival is what humans do best. The ridge overlooked both the cabin and the Vesperan ship. From here, Tai-Ho could see for kilometers in every direction. The cave behind them offered shelter from the cold wind. It was perfect, just as it had been 15 years ago. They're coming, Jia Yun said, pointing to the southwest. A dark shape was visible against the white landscape, moving fast. Tai-Ho nodded. He had set up his position at the mouth of the cave, Whisper resting on a flat rock. The Vesperans huddled deeper in the cave, trying to stay warm. Only Jia Yun remained by his side, serving as his spotter. It's a heavy raider, she confirmed through her scanner. At least 20 armed men on board. Tai-Ho examined the ship through his scope. Standard Crimson Skull tactics. They'll land near your ship, check the cabin, then fan out to search for us. Even you can't take down 20 raiders, Han Jie said, joining them at the cave entrance. Tai-Ho smiled slightly. I don't need to. He pulled a small device from his pocket. I just need to even the odds. What's that? Jia Yun asked. Remote detonator. Tai-Ho watched as the raider ship began its descent. I've lived here for 8 years. Did you think I wouldn't prepare for unwelcome visitors? As the raider ship touched down between the cabin and the Vesperan vessel, Tai-Ho pressed a button on the device. 3 explosions erupted around the landing site, sending snow and dirt high into the air. The raider's ship rocked but remained upright. Traps, Han Jie said with new respect. You've had explosives planted all this time. Just simple mines, Tai-Ho replied. Enough to damage, not destroy. He peered through his scope. Now they're confused. They'll send scouts first. Sure enough, 4 raiders emerged from the ship, weapons ready. They moved cautiously toward the cabin. What now? Do-Won asked, hobbling to the cave entrance. His wound was bandaged, but he was still weak. Now we need to reach your ship, Tai-Ho said. It's our only way off this planet. Do-Won stared at him. Through 20 armed raiders. 17 now, Tai-Ho corrected, firing Whisper 3 times in rapid succession. 3 raiders fell in the snow. And we won't go through them. We'll go around. Tai-Ho pulled a map from his coat, hand-drawn, showing the area in detail. There's a ravine that runs behind this ridge. It will take us behind a raider's position. He looked at Han Jie. Can your men fight? Han Jie nodded. Our weapons are still weak from the cold, but at close range they'll work. Good enough. Tahoe folded the map. Jai Yun, help the ambassador. We move in 5 minutes. As they prepared to leave, Tahoe rigged more traps at the cave entrance, simple but effective devices made from items in his backpack. Where did you learn this? Jai Yun asked, watching him work. Survival training, Tahoe replied. Humans had to get creative during the war. We were outgunned, outmanned, and out-teched in every way. Yet you held out for 8 years, she observed. Desperation is a powerful teacher. Tahoe finished the last trap. Ready. They moved silently through the ravine, Tahoe leading the way. The snow made travel difficult, and Du-Won struggled with his injury. When he stumbled, Tahoe caught him without hesitation. I can manage, Du-Won said stiffly. No, you can't, Tahoe replied. And we need to move faster. Without waiting for permission, he helped the ambassador onto his back. Hold on. Despite the added weight, Tahoe moved efficiently through the snow. Years of hunting in these conditions had made him strong. As they neared the ships, they could hear the raiders searching the area. Gunfire echoed from the direction of the cave. Tahoe's traps were being triggered. We have minutes before they realize the cave is empty, Hanja warned. They reached the edge of the clearing. Both ships sat just 50 meters away, but open ground separated them from safety. Raiders moved between the vessels. We need a diversion, Tahoe said. He looked at the remaining explosives in his pack, then at the raiders' ship. I can disable their engines. When they respond to that, you make for your ship. And you? Jai Yun asked. I'll cover you, Tahoe said, readying his rifle. No, Hanjae said firmly. We go together or not at all. Tahoe looked surprised. Hanjae continued, you saved the ambassador's life. The Confederation does not forget its debts. For a moment, Tahoe was silent. Then he nodded. Together then, but we'll need to be fast. He handed the explosives to Hanjae with quick instructions. Then he looked at each of them. When the explosion happens, run. Don't stop for anything. Hanjae moved silently toward the raiders' ship. Tahoe positioned himself with whisper ready. On my mark, he whispered, sighting down the scope. 3, 2, 1. Mark. The explosion rocked the raiders' ship. Fire erupted from its engines, and alarms blared across the clearing. The raiders shouted and ran toward their damaged vessel. Now, Tahoe commanded. They sprinted across the open ground toward the Vesperan ship. Tahoe fired whisper from his hip as they ran, dropping 2 raiders who spotted them. Hanjae and his guards used their weapons at close range, where the cold didn't weaken them as much. Jai Yun helped Du-Won, who struggled to keep pace, when a raider appeared in front of them. She grabbed the ambassador's pistol and fired, hitting the raider square in the chest. Well done, Tahoe called to her. They reached the ship, and Hanjae quickly worked the door controls. The entrance slid open, and they piled inside. Blaster fire hit the hull as the last raiders realized what was happening. Get to the bridge. Du-Won ordered. Start the engines. Hanjae and his men rushed forward. Jai Yun helped Du-Won to a seat and secured him. Tahoe took position at the door, picking off raiders who came too close. The navigation is still down, Hanjae called from the bridge. We can't leave the planet. Tahoe fired one last shot, then sealed the ship's door. I can fix it, he said. Everyone stared at him. You? Fix Vesperan technology? Du-Won asked in disbelief. I studied your systems during the war, Tahoe explained, moving to the bridge. Know your enemy better than they know themselves. That's how we survived as long as we did. Inside the bridge, Tahoe examined the navigation panel. The raider's ion pulse had scrambled the system. He pulled tools from his pocket and began working, his movements sure and precise. This is impossible, one of the guards muttered. No human should understand our tech this well. You'd be surprised what humans can learn when they need to, Taiho replied, not looking up from his work. He connected wires and reset circuits. There. Try it now. Hanja activated the system. The navigation display flickered, then came to life. It's working. Setting course for Confederation space. The ship hummed as the engines powered up. Outside, the raiders fired desperately at the hull, but it was too late. The Vesperan vessel rose into the air and accelerated away from Frostfall. As the planet grew small beneath them, Du-1 summoned Tahoe to his quarters. The ambassador sat in a chair, his wound properly treated by the ship's medical system. You saved my life, Du-1 said, his tone formal. You saved all our lives. Tahoe nodded but said nothing. I misjudged you, Du-1 continued, clearly uncomfortable. I saw only a primitive human living in squalor. I failed to see the warrior, the survivor. He paused. The hero. I'm no hero, Tahoe said quietly, just a soldier who did what was necessary. The Confederation has been wrong about humans, Du-1 admitted. We saw you as lesser beings because your technology wasn't as advanced. We failed to recognize your adaptability, your ingenuity. Jai-Yun entered the room. Ambassador, we're being hailed by a Confederation patrol. They'll escort us to Nexus Prime. Nexus Prime, Tahoe repeated, a distant look in his eyes. I never thought I'd see it again. Du-1 studied him. The human colony you fought to defend. Would you like to see what it has become? Tahoe hesitated. My home is on Frostfall now. A hermit with a rusted rifle? Jai-Yun asked gently. Or the man I saw today, the man who could help change how our peoples see each other. Du-1 stood with some effort. I'm offering you a position, Tahoe. As a security advisor to the Confederation, your perspective could be valuable. Why would you want the Winter Ghost advising you? Tahoe asked. Because today you showed that you can protect even those who once were your enemies, Du-1 said. That is rare wisdom, human or Vesperan. Tahoe looked out the viewport at the stars rushing past. For 8 years, he had hidden from the galaxy and from his past. Perhaps it was time to stop hiding. I'll consider it, he said finally. 3 days later, their ship approached Nexus Prime. The once human colony was now a bustling Confederation trading hub. As they prepared to land, Hanja approached Tahoe with a package. Your rifle, he said, handing over Whisper. It's been cleaned and serviced. Tahoe took it with a nod of thanks. As he followed the others to the exit ramp, Du-1 was speaking to Confederation officials on a comm channel. Yes, we encountered raiders, the ambassador was saying. But we were saved by human ingenuity and courage. Tahoe slung the rifle over his shoulder. As the ramp lowered to reveal the gleaming spires of Nexus Prime, he thought about the marks carved into Whisper's stock. Perhaps it was time to let the past be the past. The galaxy was changing. Maybe, just maybe, he could help it change for the better.